Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the Warriors of Chaos in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. An amazing race in many respects, which has some mechanics that I feel should become standardized across the entire game because they are that freaking awesome, but also a race that kind of has issues given the way Warhammer 3 is played. Basically, Warriors of Chaos are so far ahead in certain respects compared to every other race in the game that they can trivialize the entire campaign. But before I talk about those kind of issues, I want to talk about what Warriors of Chaos do so very, very well and what makes them an awesome race. First off, let's talk about Dark Fortresses. Dark Fortresses are formidable strongholds that you control. The great thing about them is the fact that, unlike every other race in the game, which recruits units at, different tiers, you get to tier 4, you get to tier 5, you get different units, the entire Warriors of Chaos roster is available much earlier on. It depends on how you're playing your campaign. You want to be very aggressive, conquer a lot of territory, you'll probably get a higher tier army. You want to play more slowly, you'll probably won't have as much of a higher tier army. But the actual units these Dark Fortresses give you are limited, and you can access those units anyway through the Warband recruitment system. So for instance, let's consider a situation where you have Dragon Ogres as a tier 5 unit. Well, you can get Dragon Ogres just for the Warband recruitment system. It is randomized, and that certainly can feel annoying at times, but you can get pretty much every single unit in the Warriors of Chaos roster without needing a settlement. That is great because it avoids the pitfall that virtually every other race has, where a lot of the really cool and fun stuff is locked behind higher tiers. To be sure, there are certainly some requirements with the Warband upgrade system in order to get all of those units, but it does mean that the army progression that you do have is going to feel a lot better than other races. And that is great. These Dark Fortresses are largely economic centers and hero recruitment capacity centers, because each of them can increase your hero capacity by 1 for cast sorcerers and exalted heroes. That's pretty good. And they can each generate a fairly good amount of money. So over here, for instance, my initial Dark Fortress, which is tier 4, is generating on its own 12,700 gold. Let me say that there are entire provinces of other races that would not generate this much gold at this tier. Depends on the provinces, depends on how you've built things. It does vary, but certainly you can generate a good amount of money for these things. And on top of that, one of the reasons you can generate a good amount of money is because you have economic modifiers in them. So the Shaman's Temple giving you extra income, plus 40%, going up to 50%, just like the Skaven. But you also can increase your vassal income, and your main economic building goes up to 1,000 at tier 4. You might have only a couple of them, but they will certainly generate a good amount of money. And also make your vassals more useful in a campaign than any other race. And vassalization is a core mechanic for all of the Warriors of Chaos. So that's a great factor for them. Then you have the Warband upgrade system. The Warband upgrade system adds so much variety and in a really good way in your armies. Certainly there are units that you're always going to want to recruit. So Warriors of Chaos themselves, chosen, really good units. Chaos Knights with lances, in particular of Slaanesh, being really good. But you also have other units like Armored Chaos Trolls, Dragon Ogres, Shaggoths, Dragon Ogres, demonic units. So an army like this is extremely powerful. But even an army like this with Festus, and by the way, I'm using a mod that gives you Legionary Lore mechanics when you confederate them. That's how I have infections and plagues over here while playing as Be'lakor, because I confederated Festus. But regardless of that, you end up with varied armies, powerful armies that just work maybe a bit too well. Then on top of that, you do have the various Gifts of Chaos, which give you various faction-wide effects, including some really sweet units. Things like Skull Cannons, Bloodthirsters, Hell Cannons, etc. It can be a bit annoying though, admittedly, with Gifts of Chaos, because you do have limited slots. But regardless, between the Dark Fortresses incentivize you as a player, even though you have every single climate in the game available to you, but beyond these Dark Fortresses incentivize you as a player to always go for certain pieces of territory until you get to a point where you just don't care about the economy anymore, and then you can do whatever you want. The Warband upgrade system, even the Warband recruitment system, the Dark Fortress economic potential, and the fact that you have hero recruitment that you can get for research, where you can recruit both hero types, be it exalted heroes or chaos sorcerers, on the front line. It won't increase capacity for these minor assignments, but it will at least give you the ability of recruiting these heroes on the front line. So you're always in a situation as Warriors of Chaos where you never have to stop and go back or send an army from your base to the front lines. To be sure, the downside is that you don't want to lose an army, because every single army you have is a fairly significant investment of resources. Though later on in a campaign, you'll be able to recruit so many units for the Warband upgrade for the Warband recruitment system that you kind of won't care. Like, I can recruit an entire freaking stack over here if I want to. I don't want to, because that will crash my economy, but it gives you an idea. And it would be a varied army. Furthermore, you do have, and that's just like the Warband recruitment units. Sure, Chaos Warhounds may not be the best units, but Spawns, Trolls, Marauders, which you can upgrade in Warriors of Chaos once you get a certain amount of experience on them, that's good. And you have a very, very large pool of regiments renown available to you when you're playing as the Warriors of Chaos. Maybe one of the largest pools of regiments renown in the entire game. Probably not the largest. I think Daniel actually has the largest pool of regiments renown, but you're pretty damn close to that. Especially if you're playing Undivided Warriors of Chaos. So that is all really good with regards to them. On top of that, you also have more uniqueness, more variation in every single army, because every single generic lord you have, every single hero you have, can be dedicated to a god. If you're playing one of the 4 mono gods, obviously you can only dedicate to that mono god, but if you're playing Undivided, again, you have a great deal of variety, and you also have a great deal of variety with regular units themselves, the warriors themselves. So that is a great system in itself. You can turn a generic lord into an Undivided or a monogod demon prince. That, again, all of this is pretty good, very well done by Creative Assembly. So what are the issues that I do consider exist with Warriors of Chaos? Well, for starters, a lot of that univariety that I just mentioned is locked behind research. So if you want specific god units, you need to get the brands. So the Rusted brand, the Searing brand, that just takes time. That's not the biggest issue, but it just means you're not necessarily going to have that variety right out of the gate, which is a bit annoying. The real annoyance is that the Gifts of Chaos themselves, unless you're playing specifically as Bellicord, those Gifts of Chaos, the slots themselves are also locked. If you're playing one of the monogods, you'll have some variety with those gifts for the specific god, but you'll miss out on the other gods. But if you want to get more Gifts of Chaos, you are going to have to unlock that for research. And let's just say that can take a decent amount of time in your campaign. So that is a bit annoying with regards to just unlocking the gifts. Never mind that each of these Gifts of Chaos does take a good amount of souls to spend in order to really reach the level requirement. So if you want something like a Soul Grinder of Nurgle or a Great Unclean One, be ready to spend a terrific amount of souls throughout the course of your campaign to even unlock them. And you're not just going to get one every single turn. And unless you're playing Bellicord, there is a limit to these. That brings me to another point. Bellicord is so far ahead of all the other campaigns, it's not even funny. because he starts with 4 Gifts of Chaos beyond just an undivided one. I mean, Archaon starts with the undivided ones. But if you're playing Be'lakor, you have 1 gift slot already unlocked for each of the gods and 1 undivided one. That creates a much better variety in your campaign. And while others can catch up, having that available from the very beginning of your campaign just elevates Be'lakor to a much higher level. There's almost no point in playing any of the other Warriors of Chaos Legendary Lords, with the exception of Festus, believe it or not, because Khorne, I'll be honest, Valkia can be fun, but Skarbrand and Arbol are, like, if you're looking for a Khorne campaign, Arbol and Skarbrand are just better campaigns, flat out, in a lot of ways. But if you're looking for a Nurgle campaign, well, funnily enough, Festus can actually spam more plagues and have a lot more variety, better armies, better economy, etc., than actual Nurgle campaigns, without the annoyances of climate limitations. So the only one that's worth it to play outside of Be'lakor is Festus if you're just looking for a Nurgle experience. But for a Warriors of Chaos experience, yeah, Be'lakor blows the other ones out of the water. And he's also available for free. This is a good thing, because it's a great campaign for free, in the sense you don't have to buy any DLC, you don't have to own Archaon, Sigvald, or Kolic to play him. You may want to own the Champions of Chaos DLC, but even then, you can have a pretty good time with Be'lakor without any DLC whatsoever. Strong point in him, in his campaign, but just leaves others in the dust. What also leaves them in the dust is that Be'lakor can put up portals around the entire campaign map that give you instant teleportation with no cooldown. That is as absurdly broken as you might think. So over here, you start with 1 portal. You have another one over here in Ostermark. And then you have another one in the southern Chaos Wastes. I believe there is one right there. But it just means when you're playing as Be'lakor in his campaign, you end up in this kind of situation where you have a lot more campaign flexibility than the other one. So like over here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rifts that I created during the course of this campaign by turn 36. And this is instant teleportation between any one portal and another. It works for heroes, it works for lords, and there is no freaking cooldown. If you understand exactly why Be'lakor is completely and utterly broken compared to all the others, you understand that point. The other issue I do have with Warriors of Chaos, their armies. So you will never have enough money to recruit a large number of armies in a campaign as Warriors of Chaos. And it's kind of slow going. Because yes, Be'lakor may get teleportation, to be sure, but you're not getting the movement range that someone like Khorne is getting, even if you're playing Valkia. So you're moving around slowly on the campaign map, but with such a level of force that no one is going to be able to stand up to you. And that makes it pretty ridiculous. What makes it even more ridiculous is you can subjugate an enormous number of factions in a campaign. So you end up, as opposed to playing a regular campaign, you know what you end up doing? You're playing ping pong with settlements. Like, for instance, over here, I deliberately did not destroy Altdorf. I could have, because I took out all of Karl Francis's other territories first, so I could leave Altdorf intact and make him a better vassal when I did take Altdorf. And because when you subjugate a faction, the way it works is you go up to the last settlement they control, and if it you fight the battle, you win the battle, and then you have the subjugate option over there. But that leaves the settlement intact. You're just subjugating them. And this is always worth doing, but it ends up with an absurd campaign style. Like, I have freaking Hostalten, Clan Mulder. Never mind, by the way, that you can actually vassalize for regular diplomacy as well. It won't work for Order Tide factions, but those human factions, elven factions, you can do through the subjugation mechanic. So over here, I have Wulfric, I have Clan Mulder, which I got for diplomatic vassalization, I have Castalten, I have Karl Franz and Luan Leoncourt. That is ridiculous, yes, and I'm kind of working right now to actually get my greedy little paws and Elspeth. But I don't want to destroy Null, so, I'm just going to leave that for last. Going to be a bit careful when I do decide to declare war on her. She's losing a war anyway to to Sylvania at this point, so I'm just gonna have to be careful with regards to that. But it creates this not so great campaign dynamic where you're not really dealing, you no longer really consider factions as a challenge, because most of them are not, for the record. Instead, you're just thinking, okay, what do I need to do to get this faction under my wing? The problem with that system is that it creates this dynamic that you already are pretty strong to begin with, but you have some limitations that are supposed to keep you in check. But the moment you can vassalize legendary lord factions, those vassals can win the campaign for you. There's no point in playing a campaign because you know you've won it. Like, forget the victory conditions. By this stage in the campaign, what do I care about dealing with Nakari or dealing with Sigvald, right? What do I care about the short campaign victory conditions? Just to get an achievement over there? It's pointless, really. You do that once, you don't care about it. And besides, the short campaign victory conditions are not necessarily worth it. The long campaign just is a frustrating experience, especially because you need to control certain specific elements to achieve it. So that is not especially great as well. I think things would be more interesting if we could actually afford more armies. Like, look, at one point in a campaign, you just get to a stage where you don't care. But again, you are, and you don't have supply lines to hold you back, but you will still have other issues to contend with. So, like over here, you know, turn 36 being very, very aggressive, I do have 4 armies in this campaign. To be sure, 4 very powerful armies, with Festus having the weakest one. Again, like, just because I had to build it from scratch after I defeated him. That's kind of annoying when you forcefully confederate a faction, which you can do, by the way, as Bellicor and Archeon. They actually lose everything. Like, you need to reduce them to their last element. You can't do it for diplomacy. You can only do it for brute force. I suppose that makes sense, but the fact that they lose everything and you have to rebuild everything they have does make it a bit somewhat more annoying. But you will always have limitations on how many armies you have, even with the amount of money you're getting from each individual Dark Fortress, because, yeah, Chaos Warrior armies, really powerful, very expensive as well. And each army is a unique investment. That means less flexibility, that means that you're covering less of the campaign map than you could as other races. It isn't necessarily great. Like, technically, you could have infinite number of armies in the sense that you can have a huge number of lords running around the campaign map, and funnily enough, they probably could win a lot of battles on their own. Yes, that's how stupidly broken Warriors of Chaos are. Like, just put 4 lords, 4 Chaos Lords, or Undivided, or Monogod Demon Princes, you'd be surprised by how much they can actually get done on the campaign map. Against weaker factions or weaker settlements, they can deal with basic garrisons, right? While your main armies deal with the main enemy armies. But just that lack, that slow speed, that covering the campaign map, that makes it less interesting, combined with sheer amount of power that you do have, be it in the campaign map through vassalization, teleportations with the Bellicor, or subjugations, or a seductive influence that we can talk about, Azazel. It ends up being pretty ridiculous. It can be fun, you know, vassalizing all of Nagron as well can be really fun, and then unleashing that on Wolf One and watching them win the campaign for you. Or, you know, vassalizing freaking Grimgor. It's also ridiculous, I'm not gonna lie. But it's a one and done deal as far as I see it. It does lose in terms of replayability, and that's overall my biggest issue with Warriors of Chaos. They did a great job reworking them, but I also feel that they also missed the mark in certain respects. That's all I had to say. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.